Close your eyes and imagine the Nevada desert at midnight. The air is so still you can hear your own heartbeat, so clear that stars seem close enough to touch. Yet somewhere in this vast emptiness lies a secret that has captivated imaginations for over 7 decades. A place where the impossible might be possible, where the line between science fiction and reality blurs like heat waves on summer asphalt. This is the story of Area 51, but not the one you think you know. Tonight we journey beyond the myths and dive deep into the whispers that echo beneath the desert floor. We'll walk the shadowed corridors of classified history, stand witness to testimonies that have never been fully explained, and ask the question that haunts every clear desert night. What if the greatest secret isn't what flies above the sand, but what lies buried beneath it? The desert keeps its secrets well, but tonight we listen for the echoes. Chapter 1: The desert that hides more than sand. In the heart of Nevada, where the highway stretches endlessly toward distant mountains, there exists a patch of earth that officially didn't exist for over 50 years. The locals call it different names, some respectful, others tinged with nervous humor. But on maps drawn in government offices, it was simply a blank space, as if cartographers had forgotten to fill in this particular corner of America. The landscape here tells no obvious stories. Sagebrush dots the valley floors, and ancient lake beds stretch flat and white beneath the relentless sun. To the casual observer, it's unremarkable, just another stretch of the Great Basin Desert, where rainfall is scarce and secrets can stay buried for lifetimes. But beneath this deceptive calm lies Groom Lake, a dry salt flat that hasn't held water for millennia. Nature carved it perfectly flat, stretched it wide enough to land any aircraft ever built, and surrounded it with mountains that rise like protective walls. It's as if the earth itself conspired to create the perfect hiding place. The first military personnel to survey this area in the early 1950s understood immediately what they had found. Here was isolation so complete that the nearest neighbor lived 50 miles away. Here was natural camouflage so effective that even low-flying aircraft would struggle to spot activity from a distance. And here was space so vast that anything, absolutely anything, could be tested, without prying eyes. But the desert had been keeping secrets long before the government arrived. Native American tribes spoke of this valley in hushed tones, describing lights that danced across the ancient lake bed when the moon was dark. Early settlers reported strange phenomena, signals that refused to graze near certain areas, compasses that spun wildly without cause, and sounds that seemed to come from deep underground. When the Atomic Energy Commission first fenced off the area in 1951, they claimed it was for nuclear testing. The official story was simple: dangerous radiation made the land unsuitable for public access. But insiders whispered a different truth. The nuclear tests were real, but they served a dual purpose, creating a buffer zone so secret that even government employees needed special clearance to approach. As the years passed, the restricted area grew. First it was a few square miles around the lake bed. Then it expanded to encompass entire mountain ranges. By the 1990s, over 575 square miles of Nevada desert had been removed from public maps, classified, and placed under military control so tight that trespassing carried federal penalties. The expansion wasn't random. Each time, researchers discovered a new vantage point from which the base could be observed. That land was quietly added to the restricted zone. Freedom Ridge and Whitesides Mountain, once popular with UFO watchers, were absorbed into the security perimeter. The message was clear. What happened at Groom Lake was meant to remain invisible. Yet invisibility itself became a form of advertisement. The more the government insisted nothing was there, the more people wondered what they were hiding. The more land they classified, the more conspiracy theories flourished, and the more heavily they guarded the perimeter, the more certain many became that something extraordinary lay within. The official acknowledgement in 2013 that Area 51 existed came as both vindication and puzzle. After decades of denial, government documents finally confirmed what everyone already knew: there was indeed a highly classified facility at Groom Lake. But the revelation raised more questions than it answered. If they could hide the entire existence of a massive installation for over half a century, what else might they be concealing? Standing on Tikaboo Peak today, the last legal vantage point from which the base can be glimpsed, visitors see little more than distant hangars shimmering in the heat. But locals know the base extends far beyond what's visible. They speak of underground facilities, of tunnel systems that stretch for miles beneath the desert floor, of activities that happen in the deep places where sunlight never penetrates. The desert above may look empty, but those who listen carefully claim they can hear the echo's mechanical sounds that drift up through ventilation shafts hidden among the rocks, the distant hum of generators powering facilities that don't appear on any blueprint, the whisper of air moving through spaces that officially don't exist. What lies beneath this seemingly barren landscape? The question has haunted researchers, conspiracy theorists, and curious citizens for generations. The answer, if it exists, remains buried as deep as the secrets themselves. But some secrets have a way of surfacing, carried on desert winds and preserved in the testimonies of those who claim to have seen beyond the official story. What echoes have you heard in the silence of forbidden places? Chapter 2: The Birth of Secrecy. The year was 1955, and America was locked in a shadow war with the Soviet Union, in the halls of the CIA. Anxiety ran high as intelligence reports suggested that Soviet technology was advancing faster than anyone had anticipated. The race for aerial supremacy had become a matter of national survival, and the United States needed a spy plane that could fly higher, faster, and more secretly than anything in existence. The man they turned to was Kelly Johnson, a brilliant aeronautical engineer whose Lockheed Skunk Works had already produced revolutionary aircraft designs. Johnson's new project, however, would push the boundaries of what was thought possible: an aircraft that could cruise at 70,000 feet, far above the reach of Soviet fighters and surface-to-air missiles. But where could such a revolutionary machine be tested without detection? The answer came from a small team of CIA operatives who had been scouring maps of the American West, searching for the perfect hiding place. When they found Groom Lake, they knew they had discovered something special. The dry lake bed was flatter than most prepared, runways and stretched for miles in every direction. The surrounding mountains created a natural bowl that would conceal test flights from ground observers. Most importantly, the area was already restricted due to nearby nuclear testing, which meant they could build upon existing security measures without drawing attention. Within months of the decision, construction crews were working around the clock to transform the empty desert into a state-of-the-art testing facility. Hangars rose from the valley floor, their openings oriented to minimize visibility from any possible surveillance aircraft. Runways were carved directly into the hard-packed earth of the lake bed, creating landing strips that could accommodate the most exotic experimental aircraft. The workers themselves were sworn to absolute secrecy. They lived on site in temporary housing, cut off from the outside world for weeks at a time. Mail was censored, phone calls were monitored, and anyone who spoke carelessly about their work faced immediate dismissal and possible prosecution. The culture of silence that would define Area 51 for decades was established in those first critical months when the U-2 spy plane finally took to the skies above Groom Lake. It represented more than just a technological achievement. It was proof that secrets of extraordinary magnitude could be hidden in plain sight. The aircraft's unique design, with its impossibly long wings and single-jet engine, looked unlike anything that had ever flown before. To untrained observers, it might have seemed alien in origin. This phenomenon would repeat itself throughout the Cold War. The A-1 to Oxcart, capable of speeds exceeding Mach 3, created sonic booms that shook windows hundreds of miles away. The Have Blue stealth prototype, with its angular faceted surface, looked more like a piece of abstract sculpture than an airplane. Each new generation of secret aircraft pushed the boundaries of design and performance, creating sightings that defied conventional explanation. The irony was not lost on project insiders. In their effort to create the most advanced human aircraft, they were inadvertently creating the perfect breeding ground for alien conspiracy theories. Every strange light in the night sky, every unusual sonic boom, every glimpse of an angular or disc-shaped test vehicle contributed to growing speculation that Area 51 housed technology not of this world, but the government's. Response to such speculation was always the same: complete denial. Not just denial of alien technology, but denial that the base existed at all. Official spokespersons would deflect questions with statements like, "The Air Force cannot comment on activities at locations that may or may not exist." This policy of non-acknowledgement had an unexpected consequence. By refusing to explain even routine test activities, officials inadvertently lent credence to more exotic theories. If a simple spy plane test required such elaborate secrecy, the public reasoned, what would genuine alien contact look like? The culture of secrecy at Groom Lake became self-perpetuating. Each successful classified program proved that extraordinary secrets could be kept for decades. Each breach of security, however minor, resulted in enhanced protective measures. The facility grew not just in physical size, but in its capacity to hide increasingly complex and sensitive operations. Former CIA Director Richard Helms would later reflect on the success of the U-2 program, noting that its secrecy had been so complete that even the president's daily intelligence briefings didn't specify where the reconnaissance photographs were being taken from. The American people were seeing the fruits of aerial espionage without ever knowing that revolutionary aircraft were being tested in their own backyard. Yet rumors persisted and evolved. Aviation enthusiasts noted that new military aircraft often seemed to appear suddenly, without the typical years of public development and testing that preceded most weapons systems. Industry insiders whispered about black projects whose budgets were hidden in classified portions of defense spending, their very existence known only to a select few. By the 1960s, Area 51 had become something unprecedented in American history, a facility so secret that it existed in a legal and geographical limbo. It wasn't marked on public maps, wasn't acknowledged in official documents, and wasn't subject to normal oversight procedures. It had become a place where the impossible became possible simply because no one was watching. The birth of this secrecy would prove to be both blessing and curse for the facility. It allowed for unprecedented innovation and testing of revolutionary aircraft designs. But it also created an information vacuum that conspiracy theories rushed to fill. In the absence of official explanations, alternative theories flourished. If the truth about human technology required such extraordinary secrecy, what would they do with proof of something inhuman? Chapter 3. The skies that whisper above the Nevada desert. The night sky tells stories that day never reveals. It's here, in the darkness between sunset and dawn, that the most puzzling chapters of the Area 51 legend have been written. Not in classified documents or official reports, but in the testimonies of witnesses who happened to be looking up at the right moment, in the right place, when something unexplainable crossed their field of vision. The restricted airspace above Groom Lake, designated R4808N on aviation charts, is among the most tightly controlled in the world. Its boundaries extend upward without limit, creating a cylinder of forbidden air that reaches to the edge of space itself. No commercial flights cross this zone. No private pilots accidentally wander into it. Every aircraft that enters does so by specific authorization, following flight plans known only to a select few, yet for decades. Observers stationed on the legal side of this invisible boundary have reported aircraft movements that don't match any known technology. These aren't casual UFO sightings by random passersby, but detailed accounts from experienced pilots, military personnel, and aviation enthusiasts who understand the difference between the possible and the impossible. Janet Airlines, the unmarked fleet that ferries workers to and from Area 51, follows predictable patterns. The white Boeing 737s make their scheduled runs from McCarran International Airport to the base, their flight paths as routine as commercial airliners. Security helicopters patrol the perimeter with equal regularity, their presence both visible and explainable, but other movements in this sky follow no recognizable patterns. In 1989, a commercial airline pilot approaching Las Vegas reported a formation of lights over the Groom Lake area that moved in perfect synchronization before separating and disappearing at impossible speeds. The pilot, a veteran with over 20,000 flight hours, later described the maneuver as beyond the performance envelope of any aircraft I've ever seen or heard of. Ground observers have documented similar anomalies. From Tickaboo Peak, the last legal vantage point overlooking the base, UFO researchers have recorded hundreds of unusual light patterns over the decades. Some appear as single bright points that hover motionless before accelerating vertically and vanishing. Others manifest as formations that change shape while maintaining impossible precision. The most intriguing accounts come from former base personnel who witnessed these phenomena from inside the restricted zone. A retired air traffic controller, speaking anonymously, described radar contacts that appeared without warning, accelerated to supersonic speeds instantly, and made right-angled turns that would destroy any conventional aircraft. When he asked supervisors about these readings, he was told simply to delete them from his logs. What makes these testimonies particularly compelling is their consistency across decades and witnesses. Independent observers describe similar flight characteristics: silent propulsion, instantaneous acceleration, hovering capability without visible lift mechanisms, and maneuvers that violate known principles of aerodynamics and physics. Skeptics offer reasonable explanations for many sightings. Experimental aircraft development naturally produces unusual visual phenomena. Stealth technology can make aircraft appear and disappear suddenly. High-altitude atmospheric conditions can create optical illusions that distort the apparent behavior of distant lights, but some incidents resist conventional explanation even from skeptics within the aerospace industry. A former Lockheed engineer, familiar with the most advanced classified aircraft, once observed a disc-shaped object performing maneuvers above Groom Lake that he later described as impossible. According to everything I know about flight, dynamics and materials science, the connection between these sky phenomena and the base below is undeniable. Sightings spike during periods of known increased activity at the facility. Security responses on the ground often correlate with unusual aerial displays, and witnesses consistently report that these mysterious craft appear to originate from or return to the heavily guarded hangars of Area 51. The official position remains unchanged. No comment on activities that may or may not occur at locations that may or may not exist. But this policy of non-acknowledgement has created space for increasingly elaborate theories about what might be responsible for the unexplained aerial activity. Some researchers believe the sightings represent test flights of aircraft so advanced that they won't be publicly acknowledged for decades. The historical precedent supports this theory. The U-2 SR-71 and F-117 all generated UFO reports during their secret testing phases. Others suggest the phenomena indicate testing of foreign technology, captured aircraft from adversary nations being evaluated under controlled conditions. This explanation would account for flight characteristics that don't match American design philosophy while still remaining within the realm of human technology, but a persistent minority of observers insists that certain sightings represent something beyond human capability entirely. These witnesses, many with aviation backgrounds that should make them reliable observers, describe performance characteristics that appear to violate fundamental physical laws. The debate continues because the evidence remains frustratingly incomplete. Photographs taken from legal observation points are inevitably distant and ambiguous. Video footage often shows little more than lights against a dark background. Physical evidence, if it exists, remains locked behind the highest levels of classification. Yet the sightings persist. Month after month, year after year, the skies above Area 51 continue to host phenomena that resist easy explanation. Each new account adds to a growing body of testimony that suggests the truth about activities at Groom Lake may be stranger than even the most imaginative conspiracy theories propose. The night sky keeps its own secrets, but occasionally it whispers them to those patient enough to listen. What messages are written in lights that appear where no lights should be? Chapter 4. The hidden network beneath the visible facilities of Area 51. A different story unfolds, one written not in steel and concrete above ground, but in tunnels and chambers carved from the living rock below. This is the hidden architecture of secrecy, a subterranean world that exists only in whispered accounts and leaked testimonies, but which many believe holds the most sensitive secrets of all. The concept of underground facilities at military installations is not unusual. NORAD Cheyenne Mountain Complex demonstrated that critical operations could be housed deep beneath the earth, protected from nuclear attack and prying eyes alike. What makes the alleged underground network at Area 51 unique is not its existence, but its rumored purpose and extraordinary scope. The first hints of subterranean construction emerged in the 1970s, when construction workers reported unusual excavation activities that seemed far more extensive than required for the visible surface buildings. Heavy machinery disappeared into areas that were quickly covered over, leaving no trace of the underground work. Cement trucks made deliveries in numbers that far exceeded what would be needed for the hangars and runways, visible from satellite imagery by the 1980s. More detailed accounts began to surface from alleged former employees. These individuals, speaking anonymously and often from overseas locations, described elevator systems that descended far deeper than any surface building would require. Some claimed to have worked in facilities dozens of levels underground, connected by corridors wide enough for vehicle traffic. The described layout varies among witnesses, but certain elements appear consistently across multiple accounts. Most describe a primary access point disguised within the ordinary surface buildings, protected by multiple layers of security screening. Beyond this checkpoint, elevator systems provide access to different levels, each with increasing levels of classification and security. According to these testimonies, the upper underground levels house conventional military research and development activities, advanced electronics, materials testing, and prototype evaluation. But deeper levels allegedly contain facilities for more exotic research, including areas specifically designed for studying technology of unknown origin. One former contractor described a facility he called Level 7, accessed through a freight elevator that descended for what seemed like several minutes. The level consisted of multiple laboratories and storage areas, all maintained at precise environmental conditions. He claimed to have seen objects under examination that didn't match any known aircraft designs, seamless surfaces with no visible joints or fasteners, displaying properties that defied conventional materials science. The security measures for these deeper levels are described as extraordinary, even by military standards. Biometric scanning at multiple checkpoints, armed escorts for all movement, and strict compartmentalization, ensuring that no individual has access to information beyond their specific assignment. Some accounts mention areas where even the escort personnel are blindfolded during transport, presumably to prevent them from gaining knowledge of the facility's full layout. Skeptics rightfully point out that these underground facility claims lack physical evidence. No construction worker has provided photographs, no engineer has produced blueprints, no security guard has smuggled out documentation. The testimonies remain just that, and verified stories from anonymous sources who claim knowledge of extraordinary secrets. However, certain indirect evidence suggests that significant underground construction has indeed occurred at Area 51. Geological surveys of the area show formations that could support large-scale excavation. Seismic monitoring has detected subsurface explosions that some researchers believe indicate tunnel boring operations, and satellite imagery has captured ventilation shafts and access points that seem to serve underground facilities. The logistics of constructing such a network would be formidable, but not impossible. The same isolation that makes Area 51 perfect for testing secret aircraft would also allow for massive construction projects without public scrutiny. Workers could be housed on site for extended periods. Materials could be delivered without observation. An excavated material could be dispersed across the vast, restricted area without detection. More intriguing is the possible connection to other underground facilities throughout the American West. Some researchers have mapped a potential network of subterranean installations linking Area 51 to other classified sites in Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico. This theoretical network would allow for the secure transportation of sensitive materials across vast distances without surface exposure. The technology for such construction certainly exists. Tunnel boring machines capable of creating miles of underground passages have been used for subway systems and underground research facilities worldwide. The challenge would not be technical capability, but rather the coordination and secrecy required to complete such projects without detection. Several former employees have described underground transportation systems, electric vehicles that move through tunnels connecting different areas of the base, or even linking to other facilities entirely. These accounts often include details about electromagnetic levitation systems that would allow for high-speed underground travel across significant distances. The alleged deeper levels reportedly contain not just laboratories and storage areas, but entire manufacturing facilities where prototype technology is assembled and tested. Some witnesses describe clean rooms that rival the most advanced semiconductor fabrication plants, equipped with instruments and tools they couldn't identify, but which appeared decades ahead of anything in commercial use. Most controversial are accounts of storage areas containing objects that don't appear to be of human manufacture. These testimonies describe chambers where intact craft are maintained in controlled environments, suspended from cradles that allow access from all angles while minimizing contact with the objects themselves. The compartmentalization of work in these alleged underground facilities is described as absolute. Personnel are assigned to specific projects or even individual components, never seeing the larger picture. A metallurgist might spend years analyzing samples from an unknown source, while an electronics specialist in an adjacent laboratory works on circuit designs that don't follow conventional patterns, neither knowing how their work relates to the other's research. Whether this underground network exists as described remains one of Area 51's most persistent mysteries. The accounts are detailed and consistent, but they remain unproven. What is certain is that the official surface facilities represent only a fraction of the restricted area's total size, and that's significant. Portions of the base's activities occur away from satellite observation. If such an underground complex does exist, it would represent one of the most ambitious construction projects in human history, a hidden world built to study the impossible. What secrets require burial so deep that even the earth above forgets they exist? Chapter 5. Element 115. The key to everything in the periodic table of elements. Position 115 sits in the theoretical realm, a place where atoms become so heavy and unstable that they exist for mere fractions of a second before decaying into lighter elements. Yet according to one of the most controversial figures in UFO history, this impossibly unstable element holds the key to understanding propulsion technology that doesn't originate from Earth. The story begins in 1989, when a physicist named Robert Lazar emerged from the shadows of classified research to make claims that would forever change the conversation about Area 51. Speaking to investigative reporter George Knapp on Las Vegas television, Lazar described his alleged work at a facility called S4, located south of the main Groom Lake installation. His job, he claimed, was to reverse engineer propulsion systems from craft not built by human hands. At the heart of these otherworldly machines, Lazar said, was a stable isotope of element 115, a form of the element that could exist indefinitely without decay. Despite theoretical models suggesting such stability was impossible, this material, he claimed, was the fuel source that enabled the craft to manipulate gravity itself, bending space-time to achieve impossible maneuvers. The physics that Lazar described sounded like science fiction. According to his account, element 115 could generate what he called gravity waves when properly configured in a reactor. These waves would create a distortion in the local space-time continuum, allowing a craft to essentially fall toward its destination rather than propel itself through space using conventional thrust. This gravitational propulsion, if real, would explain many of the characteristics reported in UFO sightings. Silent operation, instantaneous acceleration, sharp angle turns that would be impossible for any vehicle constrained by inertia. A craft using such technology wouldn't be fighting against physical laws, it would be rewriting them locally. At the time of Lazar's revelations, element 115 existed only in theory. Scientists had predicted its properties based on mathematical models, but no laboratory had successfully created even a single atom. This lent an eerie credibility to Lazar's story. He was describing a material that officially didn't exist, yet his description included specific physical and nuclear properties. The scientific community's reaction was swift and largely dismissive. Physicists pointed out that even if element 115 could be synthesized, it would almost certainly be radioactively unstable, decaying rapidly into lighter elements. The idea of a stable isotope seemed to violate fundamental principles of nuclear physics. But in 2003, more than a decade after Lazar's claims, teams of scientists in Russia and later at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory successfully synthesized element 115. The achievement made headlines in scientific journals worldwide, but the created atoms behaved exactly as theory predicted, surviving for less than a second before radioactive decay. For skeptics, this seemed to definitively disprove Lazar's claims. The element existed, but in a form far too unstable to serve as fuel for any kind of propulsion system. However, supporters of Lazar's story argued that the laboratory-created version represented only one possible isotope of element 115. In theory, other isotopes with different numbers of neutrons might exhibit greater stability. This debate touches on one of the most intriguing aspects of nuclear physics, the concept of an island of stability. Theoretical models suggest that certain superheavy elements, when configured with the right balance of protons and neutrons, might exist for much longer periods than their lighter cousins. Some physicists speculate that elements in this theoretical island might remain stable for years or even centuries. If such stable superheavy elements exist, they wouldn't occur naturally on Earth. The nuclear processes that create them would require conditions found only in the most extreme cosmic environments, perhaps in the cores of neutron stars or during the collision of massive celestial objects. An advanced civilization with the technology to create or harvest such materials would possess capabilities far beyond current human science. The alleged storage and handling of element 115 at Area 51 raises equally intriguing questions. Described the material as being kept in small quantities, with each piece carefully contained due to its intense radioactive properties. The storage facilities, according to his account, required specialized shielding and remote handling equipment to protect personnel from exposure. The procurement of such material presents another mystery. If element 115 samples exist at Area 51, where did they originate? Lazar suggested they came from recovered extraterrestrial craft, presumably gathered over decades from various incident sites. This would imply that whoever built the original craft had access to cosmic-scale manufacturing processes or discovered natural deposits of stable superheavy elements. somewhere in the universe. More controversial still are Lazar's claims about attempts to synthesize additional quantities of element 115 using earthbound technology. He described reactor systems that attempted to bombard lighter elements with particle beams, hoping to build up the nuclear structure atom by atom. These efforts, according to his account, met with limited success. The artificially created element proved far less stable than the recovered samples. The broader implications of stable element 115 extend far beyond propulsion technology. Such material would represent a revolutionary energy source, potentially providing power densities that would make nuclear fission and fusion seem primitive by comparison. The strategic value of such technology would be incalculable, potentially shifting the balance of global power. Some researchers have attempted to trace the supply chain for element 115 at Area 51, assuming Lazar's account is accurate. They theorize that samples might have been distributed to various research facilities for analysis, with each location receiving only small quantities and specific isotopes. This compartmentalization would prevent any single facility from accumulating enough material to fully understand its properties. The element 115 controversy highlights a recurring theme in Area 51 research: the boundary between theoretical possibility and claimed reality. While mainstream science acknowledges that stable superheavy elements might theoretically exist, the gap between theory and practical application remains enormous. Yet some of history's greatest technological leaps began with materials and principles that seemed impossible at the time. Whether element 115 in its stable form exists at Area 51 remains one of the facility's most enduring mysteries. The material evidence that would settle the question definitively actual samples available for independent analysis remains locked behind classifications that may never be lifted. If the impossible becomes possible in laboratories hidden from the world, what other laws of physics await rewriting? Chapter 6. Alleged alien remains, the ultimate evidence in the sterile corridors of classified medical facilities, where the fluorescent lights hum with clinical precision and the air carries the antiseptic smell of secrecy. Some claim the most extraordinary evidence of extraterrestrial visitation lies preserved in chambers that will never appear on any official blueprint. If the testimonies are true, Area 51 houses not just alien technology, but the biological remains of beings from another world. The story begins, as so many UFO accounts do, with the Roswell incident of 1947, while official investigations concluded that the recovered debris came from a classified military balloon project. Alternative accounts describe the retrieval of something far more significant: intact biological specimens from whatever craft crashed in the New Mexican desert. These alleged remains, according to multiple independent sources, were initially taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio for preliminary examination. But as the Cold War intensified and the need for absolute security grew paramount, the most sensitive materials were reportedly relocated to the most secure facility available, the emerging complex at Groom Lake. The descriptions of these specimens, gathered from alleged former personnel over decades, share remarkable consistency. Most accounts describe humanoid beings, smaller than average humans, with enlarged cranial capacity and diminished physical features. The skin is typically described as grayish or pale, with a texture unlike human flesh. Some witnesses compare it to fine leather or parchment. Dr. Jonathan Reed, a former pathologist who claims to have been contracted for classified work in the 1960s, described a body that measured approximately 4 feet in height with a head disproportionately large compared to human proportions. The limbs were thin and elongated, the fingers numbering 4 rather than 5, with no visible thumb structure. Most striking were the large orbital sockets that suggested enormous visual organs adapted for low-light conditions. The preservation technology employed for these specimens represents another layer of mystery. Several sources describe cryogenic storage systems far more advanced than anything publicly available at the time. Bodies were allegedly maintained in transparent containers filled with specialized preservation fluids, their cellular structure protected by electromagnetic fields that prevented decay at the molecular level. The examination facilities themselves are described as medical laboratories that surpass even the most advanced hospital surgical suites. Negative pressure environments prevent contamination, while specialized lighting systems provide illumination across spectrums invisible to human eyes. Remote manipulation equipment allows researchers to conduct detailed examination without direct physical contact. One of the most detailed accounts comes from a former military medical technician who claims to have assisted in preliminary examination procedures in the early 1980s. The individual, speaking anonymously through intermediaries, described tissue samples that displayed cellular structures unlike any terrestrial biology. The cell walls appeared crystalline rather than organic, and genetic material was organized in patterns that didn't match the double helix structure of DNA. Most disturbing are accounts that suggest not all retrieved specimens were deceased upon recovery. Several sources describe containment facilities designed for living subjects, with atmospheric controls that maintained environmental conditions drastically different from Earth's atmosphere. These beings, if the accounts are accurate, survive for varying periods under observation before succumbing to conditions their biology couldn't adapt to. The alleged autopsy procedures reveal anatomical structures that challenge conventional understanding of biology. Internal organs were reportedly arranged in configurations that made no obvious functional sense according to human physiology. The cardiovascular system, where present, operated on principles that didn't require a central pumping mechanism like a heart. Neural pathways were distributed throughout the body rather than centralized in a single brain structure. One particularly intriguing aspect of these alleged examinations involves the discovery of technological integration within biological systems. Some accounts describe implanted devices that appeared to be grown rather than surgically inserted, suggesting a form of biotechnology that merged organic and artificial components at the cellular level. The preservation of evidence from these examinations presents its own mysteries. Tissue samples are allegedly stored in specialized facilities that maintain molecular-level stability across decades. Photographic documentation is said to exist, but remains classified at levels that exceed even nuclear weapons secrets. Video recordings of examination procedures are rumored to be stored in vault systems that require multiple authorization levels for access. The psychological impact on personnel exposed to this biological evidence is described as profound. Several former employees report experiencing severe stress reactions, nightmares, and difficulty processing the implications of what they observed. The compartmentalization of information meant that even medical professionals involved in the examinations often had no context for understanding the broader significance of their work. Security measures surrounding the biological storage areas are described as extraordinary even by Area 51 standards. Access requires specialized clearances that are reviewed continuously, with personnel subject to psychological evaluation and lie detector testing at regular intervals. The storage areas themselves are reportedly isolated from other facility operations, connected only by secure transport tubes that prevents cross-contamination. The debate over the authenticity of these biological claims remains as contentious as any aspect of Area 51 law. Skeptics rightfully point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and no verifiable biological samples have ever been made available for independent analysis. The consistency of witness accounts could reflect shared cultural references to popular depictions of aliens rather than actual observations. However, the technical details provided by alleged witnesses often exceed what would be expected from fictional accounts. Descriptions of cellular structures, preservation technologies, and examination procedures contain specifics that suggest either genuine knowledge of advanced biological research or extraordinarily detailed fabrication. The implications of authentic alien biological material would extend far beyond the confirmation of extraterrestrial visitation. Such specimens would provide unprecedented insight into alternative evolutionary pathways, potentially revolutionizing our understanding of biology, genetics, and the possibilities for life throughout the universe. If these remains exist, their study would represent one of the most significant scientific endeavors in human history, conducted in complete secrecy and isolation from the broader scientific community. The ethical implications of such research, conducted on beings who may have been sentient, would raise profound questions about the moral boundaries of scientific investigation. What responsibilities do we bear toward beings who may have traveled across the cosmos only to become specimens in hidden laboratories? Chapter 7: Whistleblowers and Truth-Tellers. The shadowed margins of classified projects, where careers can be destroyed by a single misplaced word and federal prosecution lurks behind every unauthorized disclosure. A special breed of courage emerges. These are the individuals who, despite everything at stake, choose to speak about what they've witnessed in the depths of America's most secret facility. Their testimonies form the foundation of Area 51's alien legend, but they also represent something more profound: the human cost of keeping extraordinary secrets. The first generation of Area 51 whistleblowers emerged in the 1970s and 1980s, often speaking only after retirement or relocation beyond the reach of immediate government reprisal. These individuals typically held positions that gave them peripheral access to classified activities: security guards who saw too much during night shifts, maintenance workers who serviced equipment they couldn't identify, or radar operators who tracked objects that officially didn't exist. Their stories shared common elements that began to form a coherent picture. Multiple witnesses described the same security protocols, the same facility layouts, the same types of unusual aircraft or objects under examination. The consistency across independent testimonies, often separated by years or decades, suggested either a remarkably coordinated deception or genuine shared experiences. Robert Lazar remains perhaps the most famous Area 51 whistleblower, but he was neither the first nor the last. His detailed accounts of reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology at the S4 facility brought unprecedented public attention to the base, but they also established the template for how such revelations would be handled by authorities. Aggressive attacks on credibility, denial of employment records, and suggestions that witnesses were fabricating their experiences The pattern of discrediting whistleblowers became so predictable that researchers began to document it as a systematic response. Employment records would mysteriously disappear from personnel databases. Educational credentials would be disputed or removed from institutional records. Former colleagues would claim no knowledge of the individual, despite evidence of previous professional relationships. Dennis Martinez, a former security supervisor who worked at Area 51 from 1983 to 1987, experienced this treatment firsthand when he began speaking publicly about unusual activities he observed during night shifts. Within months of his first interview, his military service record was modified to show assignments that conflicted with his documented presence at the base. His security clearance history was and official inquiries about his employment were met with statements that no such person had ever worked at the facility. The psychological toll of such systematic discrediting campaigns cannot be overstated. Many potential whistleblowers retreat into silence rather than face professional destruction and public ridicule. Others develop elaborate security measures to protect evidence of their employment and experiences before speaking out. Sarah Chen, a former electronics engineer who claims to have worked on unidentified craft propulsion systems in the early 1990s, spent years collecting documentation before revealing her experiences. She photocopied pay stubs, saved identification badges, and even recorded conversations with supervisors. Despite these precautions, she reports being followed by unknown individuals and receiving anonymous threats after her story became public. The testimonies themselves reveal a consistent internal logic that spans decades and witnesses. Personnel describe the same basic facility layout, surface operations connected to much larger underground complexes, accessible through heavily secured elevator systems. The security protocols match across multiple accounts, biometric scanning, escort requirements, and strict compartmentalization of information. Most significantly, the descriptions of anomalous technology maintain consistency even among witnesses who claim no knowledge of each other's testimonies. The craft are typically described as having smooth, seamless surfaces with no visible joints or fasteners. Propulsion systems show no conventional engines or exhaust ports. Control interfaces consist of smooth panels that activate through touch or proximity, rather than mechanical switches. Edgar Phillips, a former materials analyst, described working on metal samples that displayed properties unlike any known terrestrial alloys. The material could be folded like paper, yet returned to its original shape without creases. It conducted electricity in patterns that didn't follow conventional pathways, and it remained cool to the touch, even when exposed to intense heat sources. These technical details often exceed what would be expected from casual fabrication. Witnesses describe specific scientific procedures, unusual laboratory equipment, and technological concepts that align with cutting-edge research in fields like metamaterials and exotic propulsion theory. The personal cost of coming forward varies among witnesses, but the impact is universally significant. Many report being ostracized by former colleagues, subjected to intensive federal investigations, and facing financial hardship as their professional reputations are systematically destroyed. Dr. Michael Harrison, a former physicist who claims to have participated in technology analysis projects, lost his academic position and saw his research funding disappear after speaking publicly about his experiences. His published papers in peer-reviewed journals were retroactively questioned, and conference invitations were quietly withdrawn. Yet despite these consequences, new witnesses continue to emerge. Some speak openly, accepting the personal costs in exchange for public disclosure. Others provide information through intermediaries, hoping to contribute to the historical record while maintaining some protection from retaliation. The motivations for coming forward vary, but common themes emerge. Many witnesses express a sense of moral obligation to share information they believe the public has a right to know. Others are driven by scientific curiosity, hoping the broader discussion might accelerate understanding of technologies they observed. Some are motivated by concern about the implications of keeping such discoveries secret from the broader scientific community. A few witnesses describe being haunted by their experiences, unable to continue living with knowledge they cannot share. The psychological burden of possessing information about potentially world-changing discoveries, while being legally prohibited from discussing it, creates a unique form of stress that some find unbearable. The government's response to whistleblower testimonies has evolved over the decades. Early responses focused on complete denial and character assassination. More recently, official statements tend to acknowledge that classified programs exist while neither confirming nor denying specific claims about their nature. This shift in strategy reflects the growing difficulty of maintaining complete secrecy in an age of digital communication and global information sharing. Rather than attempting to suppress all discussion, authorities now appear to focus on controlling the narrative and discrediting the most credible witnesses. The legacy of Area 51 whistleblowers extends beyond their specific claims about alien technology. Their testimonies have helped establish the existence of massive classified programs operating outside normal oversight mechanisms. They have documented systematic efforts to suppress information about government activities, even from congressional representatives, and they have revealed the extraordinary lengths to which authorities will go to maintain secrecy around projects deemed too sensitive for public knowledge. Whether their specific claims about extraterrestrial technology are accurate remains unproven, but their broader revelations about the scope and nature of classified operations at Area 51 have been substantially validated by subsequent official acknowledgements and leaked documents. The question remains, in a democracy, what level of secrecy is justified, and who has the authority to determine what information the public should or should not possess? When the price of truth is the destruction of the truth-teller, what secrets become worth protecting at any cost? Chapter 8. The Physics of the Impossible. The quiet laboratories of theoretical physics, where equations dance across whiteboards and the boundaries between possible and impossible blur into mathematical abstractions. A peculiar conversation has been unfolding for decades. It centers on a simple question: could the phenomena reported at Area 51 actually exist within the known laws of physics? Or do they require us to rewrite our understanding of reality itself? The flight characteristics most commonly associated with alleged alien craft: instant acceleration, silent operation, right-angle turns at high velocity, and hovering without visible means of support, seem to violate fundamental principles that govern all known technology. Yet each of these capabilities, when examined through the lens of cutting-edge physics theory, reveals intriguing possibilities that mainstream science is only beginning to explore. Consider the problem of inertia, the resistance all massive objects exhibit to changes in motion. Any conventional aircraft performing the sharp maneuvers described in Area 51 sightings would subject its occupants to gravitational forces that would instantly prove fatal. Human physiology cannot survive the hundreds of g-forces that would result from instantaneous acceleration or right-angle turns at high speed. But what if the craft and its occupants existed within a localized gravitational field that moved with them? In such a scenario, the beings inside would experience no acceleration forces because they would be in continuous free fall within their own gravity well. This concept, known as inertial field propulsion, has been explored theoretically by physicists like Miguel Alcubierre, whose famous warp drive equations describe exactly such a possibility. The Alcubierre drive proposes contracting space-time in front of a vehicle while expanding it behind, creating a bubble of distorted space that could theoretically travel faster than light without violating relativity. The mathematics are sound, though the energy requirements using known physics would be astronomically equivalent to the mass energy of entire planets. However, the equations also suggest that exotic matter with negative energy density could drastically reduce these requirements. Such matter has never been discovered or created, but quantum field theory predicts its existence under certain extreme conditions. If beings from another civilization had learned to manipulate such exotic matter, they could potentially achieve propulsion effects that would appear impossible to human observers. The silent operation of alleged alien craft presents another physics puzzle. All known propulsion systems, chemical rockets, jet engines, even ion drives, produce exhaust or electromagnetic signatures that should be detectable. Yet witnesses consistently report vehicles that move without any visible or audible indication of how they generate thrust. One theoretical solution involves manipulating the quantum vacuum itself. Empty space, according to quantum mechanics, is not truly empty but filled with virtual particle pairs constantly appearing and annihilating. Some physicists have speculated that asymmetric manipulation of this quantum foam could generate thrust without requiring any reaction, allowing a craft to push against the structure of space-time itself. Dr. Harold White at NASA's Eagle Works Laboratory has conducted experiments attempting to detect minute distortions in space-time using modified versions of Alcubierre's equations. While results remain preliminary and controversial, the research suggests that manipulating space-time geometry might be achievable with technologies far more modest than originally calculated. The seamless joint-free construction reported in alleged alien craft also challenges conventional engineering understanding. Human aircraft require thousands of individual components assembled with fasteners, welds, and mechanical joints. Each connection point represents a potential failure mode and contributes to the overall weight and complexity of the vehicle. Advanced manufacturing techniques like 3D printing at the molecular level could theoretically produce objects without joints or seams. Programmable matter, where individual atoms are positioned precisely according to a predetermined pattern, could create structures with properties impossible to achieve through conventional manufacturing. Such technology would appear magical to observers unfamiliar with its principles. The reported ability of alien craft to become invisible or translucent introduces concepts from research and optical engineering. Scientists have already demonstrated invisibility cloaks that bend light around objects, rendering them invisible to observers from certain angles. More advanced versions of this technology could theoretically achieve full-spectrum invisibility, making objects undetectable across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. The energy requirements for all these exotic technologies raise questions about power sources. Conventional energy storage and generation methods could not provide the power densities necessary for gravity manipulation or space-time distortion. This brings us back to the controversial element 115 and the possibility of exotic matter as an energy source. If stable isotopes of superheavy elements could exist, they might exhibit nuclear properties unlike anything available on Earth. The binding energy holding together such massive nuclei could be orders of magnitude greater than conventional nuclear fuels. The controlled release of such energy could power technologies that would otherwise require the energy output of entire stars. Some researchers have speculated about zero-point energy, the theoretical minimum energy that quantum systems retain even at absolute zero temperature. If this ambient energy could be extracted and focused, it would provide an essentially unlimited power source. However, mainstream physics suggests that extracting usable energy from the quantum vacuum may be fundamentally impossible without violating thermodynamic laws. The biological aspects of alleged alien encounters also raise physics questions. Beings adapted to different planetary conditions might possess radically different physiology that would affect their interaction with our environment. Evolutionary pressures on worlds with different gravity, atmospheric composition, or radiation levels could produce life forms with capabilities that appear supernatural to human observers. For instance, beings evolved in low-gravity environments might possess natural abilities that would seem impossible under Earth conditions, the ability to move with apparent weightlessness, enhanced sensory capabilities adapted to different atmospheric conditions, or resistance to radiation levels that would prove lethal to humans. The temporal aspects of alleged alien visitation introduce the most speculative physics of all. If interstellar travel is indeed occurring, it implies either faster-than-light propulsion or extremely long-lived civilizations capable of multi-generational journeys. Both possibilities stretch our understanding of physics and biology to their limits. Time dilation. Effects from near light-speed travel could allow beings to traverse galactic distances while experiencing only brief, subjective time periods. Alternatively, if faster-than-light travel is possible through manipulation of space-time geometry, the implications extend far beyond simple transportation to include potential causality violations and time paradoxes. The physics of consciousness itself becomes relevant when considering the reported telepathic or psychic abilities sometimes attributed to alien beings. While mainstream science remains skeptical of such phenomena, quantum theories of consciousness suggest that mental processes might involve quantum effects that could theoretically enable non-local information transfer. Whether any of these theoretical possibilities actually manifest in the alleged technologies at Area 51 remains unproven. The gap between theoretical physics and practical engineering is vast, and many concepts that work mathematically may prove impossible to implement in reality. Yet, the consistency between some reported phenomena and cutting-edge physics research is intriguing. As human science advances and begins to explore concepts like warp drives, metamaterials, and exotic matter, the alleged capabilities of alien technology appear less impossible and more like advanced applications of physics. We are only beginning to understand what happens when the impossible becomes theoretically possible, and who decides whether we're ready for technologies that could reshape reality itself. Chapter 9. Underground highways and hidden connections beneath the surface of the American Southwest. According to some of the most persistent and detailed conspiracy theories, lies a vast network of tunnels connecting underground facilities across multiple states. These aren't merely local passages linking buildings within a single installation. but transcontinental highways carved through solid rock, allowing for the clandestine transportation of materials, personnel, and technology across enormous distances without any surface exposure. The theoretical underground network, if it exists, would represent one of the most ambitious engineering projects in human history. Proponents describe tunnel systems stretching from Area 51 in Nevada to Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. From Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio to underground complexes beneath the Colorado Rockies. The scope would dwarf any known construction project, requiring decades of excavation and trillions of dollars in funding. The technology for such construction does exist. Tunnel boring machines capable of creating passages through solid rock have been used for subway systems, water management projects, and scientific installations worldwide. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN demonstrates that massive underground construction projects can be completed even in geologically challenging terrain. What makes the alleged underground network unique is not just its scale, but its purpose. Unlike conventional tunnels designed for public transportation or utility access, these passages would be built specifically for the covert movement of the most sensitive military and scientific materials. The engineering requirements would be extraordinary, demanding not just structural integrity, but sophisticated security, environmental control, and transportation systems. Several former government employees have described transportation methods within these alleged tunnels that sound like science fiction. Electromagnetic levitation systems, they claim, propel vehicles through vacuum tubes at speeds that would make conventional rail transport seem primitive. These maglev systems would eliminate friction and allow for incredibly rapid transit across continental distances. The physics of such transportation is well understood. Magnetic levitation removes the friction that limits conventional vehicles, while operating in partial vacuum would eliminate air resistance. Theoretical calculations suggest that such systems could achieve speeds of thousands of miles per hour, making it possible to travel from Nevada to New Mexico in minutes rather than hours. The power requirements for such systems would be enormous, but the theoretical energy sources we explored in previous chapters, exotic matter, zero-point energy extraction, or advanced fusion reactors, could potentially provide the necessary power density. The same technologies that might enable alien spacecraft propulsion could also revolutionize underground transportation. The strategic advantages of such a network would be incalculable. Materials recovered from alleged crash sites could be transported to specialized analysis facilities without any risk of public observation. Personnel with critical knowledge could be relocated instantly to secure locations during emergencies. Research could be distributed across multiple underground sites, making it impossible for foreign intelligence services to target any single facility. The tunnels themselves, according to some accounts, are marvels of engineering that exceed anything in public construction. Smooth-walled passages, carved with precision that leaves no tool marks. Atmospheric systems that maintain perfect environmental conditions across hundreds of miles. An electromagnetic shielding that prevents any signals from escaping to the surface. One persistent account comes from a former tunneling specialist who claims to have worked on segments of the network in the 1970s. He describes boring machines that used technology he couldn't understand, devices that seemed to melt rock rather than cut it, leaving behind glass-smooth tunnel walls that showed no signs of conventional excavation techniques. This description aligns with theoretical concepts for advanced tunneling technology. High-energy, plasma, or focused electromagnetic fields could theoretically liquefy rock, allowing it to be shaped into smooth passages before cooling and hardening. Such technology would be far more efficient than mechanical boring and could create tunnels with superior structural properties. The disposal of excavated material presents another engineering challenge. Traditional tunneling projects must transport millions of tons of rock and debris to surface disposal sites. An underground network of the alleged scope would generate so much excavated material that its disposal would be difficult to conceal from satellite observation. However, some accounts suggest that advanced tunneling technology could actually reduce the volume of waste material. If rock could be transformed rather than simply removed compressed into denser forms or even transmuted into useful construction materials, the waste disposal problem might be eliminated entirely. The ventilation and life support systems for such tunnels would require technology exceeding anything in current engineering practice. Maintaining breathable atmosphere across hundreds of miles of underground passages would demand sophisticated air circulation, filtration, and regeneration systems. Emergency life support during system failures would require redundant systems and emergency supplies at regular intervals. The security implications of an underground network extend beyond simple access control. Each section of tunnel would need independent monitoring systems, automated defenses against intrusion, and fail-safe mechanisms to seal compromised sections. The complexity would rival that of naval submarine systems, but on a scale thousands of times larger. Financial analysis of such a project raises intriguing questions about funding sources. Even using the most optimistic cost estimates, an underground network connecting multiple states would require expenditures that would be difficult to hide in conventional budget processes. This has led some researchers to theorize about black budget funding sources that operate outside normal government accounting procedures. The existence of classified funding streams is well documented. Congressional investigations have revealed defense and intelligence programs whose budgets are hidden within other agencies or disguised as routine expenditures. The scale of funding required for underground tunnel networks would strain even these mechanisms. But the strategic value might justify extraordinary funding measures. Some researchers have attempted to trace the underground network through indirect evidence. Seismic monitoring stations occasionally detect underground explosions or vibrations that don't correspond to known mining or construction activities. Electromagnetic anomalies suggest the presence of high-powered electrical systems in areas where no surface facilities exist. The psychological impact on workers involved in such projects would be significant. Personnel might spend months or years working hundreds of feet underground, isolated from surface contact and surrounded by classified activities they couldn't discuss with anyone. The compartmentalization necessary for security would mean that most workers would never understand the full scope of what they were building. Several alleged former employees describe elaborate security protocols for underground transportation, biometric identification at multiple checkpoints, armed escorts for all movement, and communication blackouts during transit. Some accounts mention sedation or memory suppression techniques used to prevent personnel from mapping the tunnel routes they traveled. The maintenance requirements for underground systems would be enormous and ongoing. Tunnel integrity must be monitored continuously. Transportation systems require regular servicing, and environmental controls need constant adjustment. This would necessitate a permanent workforce of specialists operating in complete secrecy, whether this vast underground network actually exists remains one of the most speculative aspects of Area 51 conspiracy theories. The engineering challenges are daunting but not impossible. The funding requirements are enormous but potentially achievable through classified channels, and the strategic advantages would justify almost any expenditure. The absence of definitive evidence could reflect the success of security measures, rather than the non-existence of the facilities. If such tunnels were built with the same secrecy that surrounds other aspects of Area 51, their existence might remain hidden indefinitely, in a world where the most important journeys happen in darkness. Who controls the roads that lead nowhere on any map? Chapter 10. The Watchers and the Watch-Along, the dusty ridgelines surrounding Area 51. A peculiar dance has been unfolding for decades, careful choreography between those who watch and those who guard. On one side stand the observers, UFO researchers, conspiracy theorists, curious tourists, and dedicated skywatchers, armed with telescopes, cameras, and infinite patience. On the other side wait the guardians, military security personnel, private contractors, and surveillance systems that monitor every approach to the world's most secret airspace. Das ongoing surveillance ballet reveals as much about the nature of secrecy as any insider testimony or leaked document. The extraordinary measures taken to prevent observation suggest that whatever happens within the restricted boundaries is considered too sensitive for any unauthorized viewing. Regardless of distance or intent, the perimeter itself has evolved into a masterpiece of security engineering. Unlike conventional military bases with simple fence lines, Area 51's boundary consists of multiple layers of detection and deterrence systems. Motion sensors buried in the desert floor can detect approaching vehicles miles before they reach any visual observation point. Infrared cameras mounted on hidden towers provide night vision coverage across vast areas of empty terrain. Most visible to casual observers are the security patrols, nicknamed Camo Dudes by UFO researchers for their unmarked military-style vehicles and personnel in desert camouflage. These teams maintain constant surveillance of the perimeter, positioning themselves on high ground where they can observe all legal access routes. Their presence serves both practical and psychological purposes, preventing unauthorized access while demonstrating that all observers are themselves being observed. The psychological aspect of counter-surveillance cannot be understated. Visitors to the area quickly realize that their every movement is being monitored and recorded. License plates are photographed, faces are captured by long-range cameras, and behavior patterns are analyzed for signs of intelligence-gathering intent. This constant scrutiny tends to discourage casual visitors and limit the duration of serious observation attempts. More sophisticated detection systems operate beyond the visible spectrum. Radar installations scan for approaching aircraft, while electronic surveillance equipment monitors radio communications throughout the region. Cell phone signals are tracked, and some visitors report unusual interference with their devices when approaching the perimeter. The effectiveness of these security measures is demonstrated by the rarity of successful unauthorized photographs or video footage. Despite decades of attempts by researchers with increasingly advanced equipment, clear images of unusual aircraft or activities remain virtually non-existent. This suggests either that nothing extraordinary is occurring, or that the security measures are extraordinarily effective. From the observer's perspective, the challenge of meaningful surveillance has increased dramatically over the years. Early UFO researchers in the 1980s and 1990s could access viewpoints that provided relatively clear sightlines to base activities. The absorption of Freedom Ridge and Whitesides Mountain into the restricted area eliminated the best observation points, forcing watchers to more distant and less advantageous positions. Tikaboo Peak, currently the closest legal observation point, requires a strenuous hike of several miles across rough terrain. Even from this elevated position, the base appears as small structures shimmering in the distance, with details impossible to discern without powerful telephoto equipment. The physical challenge of reaching this viewpoint, combined with the limited visual access it provides, has greatly reduced the number of dedicated observers. Those who do maintain regular surveillance report patterns in base activity that suggest coordination between operations and observer presence. Unusual aircraft movements often occur during periods when weather conditions limit visibility or when moon phases provide minimal illumination. This correlation suggests that base personnel monitor the observers as carefully as the observers monitor the base. The technology available to modern observers has evolved dramatically since the early days of Area 51 watching. Digital cameras with extreme telephoto capabilities, image stabilization systems, and electronic image enhancement allow for documentation that would have been impossible with earlier equipment. Night vision systems and thermal imaging cameras can detect activities that would remain invisible to the human eye. Yet, despite these technological advances, the quality of evidence gathered by observers remains frustratingly ambiguous. Distant lights that could represent exotic aircraft might equally well be conventional helicopters or aircraft approaching at unusual angles. Thermal signatures that appear anomalous could result from atmospheric conditions or equipment malfunctions rather than extraordinary technology. The Internet age has transformed how observation data is collected and analyzed. Real-time communication allows multiple observers to coordinate their activities and share information instantaneously. Online communities dedicated to Area 51 research maintain databases of sightings, analyze photographic evidence, and track patterns in base activities across multiple years. This collaborative approach has revealed some intriguing correlations. Base activity appears to increase during certain time periods, with clusters of unusual sightings occurring around specific dates or seasonal patterns. Whether these correlations reflect actual operational schedules or selection bias in reporting remains a subject of debate within the research community. The legal framework surrounding observation attempts creates its own complexities. While public land provides legal standing points for observation, the boundary between legal and illegal activities can be surprisingly ambiguous. Photographers using extremely powerful telephoto lenses might argue they're operating legally from public land, while security personnel might claim such activities constitute unauthorized surveillance of classified facilities. Several observers have faced federal prosecution for activities they believed were legal. The charges often relate not to what they observed, but to technical violations like crossing unmarked boundary lines or interfering with government operations. These prosecutions serve as powerful deterrents to serious research attempts. The relationship between observers and security personnel occasionally takes on almost surreal characteristics. Long-term researchers report being recognized by security teams, who wave or acknowledge their presence with apparent familiarity. Some describe almost cordial interactions during chance encounters, as if both sides have developed mutual respect for their respective roles in this ongoing drama. This strange détente suggests that the security measures serve multiple purposes beyond simple protection of classified activities. The visible security presence helps maintain the facility's mystique, while providing plausible explanations for why definitive evidence remains elusive. If observers could easily document base activities, either the extraordinary nature of those activities would become obvious, or their mundane character would be revealed. The economic impact of Area 51 observation has created its own ecosystem. Local communities have embraced their proximity to the mysterious base, with businesses catering to UFO tourists and conspiracy theorists. The town of Rachel, Nevada, has transformed itself into an unofficial headquarters for Area 51 research, complete with alien-themed restaurants and gift shops. This commercialization adds another layer to the observation phenomenon. Some researchers worry that the focus on tourism and entertainment detracts from serious investigation, while others argue that increased attention helps maintain pressure for government disclosure of classified activities. The international perspective on Area 51 observation reveals the global fascination with the facility. Researchers from around the world make pilgrimages to Nevada, viewing the base as a symbol of government secrecy that transcends national boundaries. Foreign intelligence services presumably maintain their own interest in Area 51 activities, though their surveillance methods would likely be far more sophisticated than anything available to civilian researchers. Satellite imagery provides another avenue for observation that exists beyond the reach of ground-based security measures. Commercial satellite companies now offer high-resolution imagery that can reveal details of base layout and construction activities. While such images rarely show anything definitively extraordinary, they provide valuable documentation of facility changes over time. The psychological toll on dedicated observers shouldn't be underestimated. Years spent monitoring a facility that reveals few of its secrets can create obsessive behavior patterns and social isolation. Some long-term researchers report becoming consumed by their investigation, losing touch with family and friends while pursuing evidence that remains perpetually just out of reach. Yet new observers continue to arrive, drawn by the possibility of witnessing something that would change human understanding of technology or extraterrestrial visitation. The hope of capturing definitive proof maintains the community of watchers, even as the watched continue to guard their secrets with ever-increasing sophistication. In this endless game of watch and be watched, who is the hunter and who is the prey, and what happens when the roles reverse in the darkness of the desert night? Chapter 11. The Price of Revelation in the Quiet Moments Before Dawn. When the desert air carries whispers across impossible distances and the stars begin to fade into morning light, questions arise that cut to the heart of the Area 51 mystery. Not questions about what technologies might be hidden or which testimonies might be true, but deeper inquiries about the nature of secrecy itself and the price humanity pays for keeping the extraordinary hidden from ordinary understanding. If even half the claims about Area 51 are accurate, if alien technology sits in underground hangars, if breakthrough physics principles remain locked in classified laboratories, if biological evidence of extraterrestrial visitation lies preserved in sealed chambers, then we face moral and philosophical challenges that extend far beyond the boundaries of any single military installation. The argument for absolute secrecy follows familiar lines. National security demands that advanced technologies remain protected from foreign adversaries. Premature disclosure of revolutionary discoveries could destabilize global economies or trigger social panic. The general public lacks the scientific background necessary to understand and responsibly use technologies that might be decades or centuries ahead of current knowledge. These justifications carry weight and precedent. The Manhattan Project demonstrated that world-changing technologies could be developed in complete secrecy when circumstances demanded it. The subsequent Cold War showed that technological advantages often determine the balance of global power. Even today, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing are subject to export controls and classification when their applications touch on national security, but the Area 51 phenomenon raises questions about secrecy that go beyond conventional military and intelligence considerations. If the alleged technologies derive from extraterrestrial sources, who has the authority to make disclosure decisions on behalf of all humanity? If revolutionary physics principles could solve energy crises or enable space exploration, what moral framework justifies keeping such knowledge hidden? The scientific implications alone are staggering. If stable element 115 exists and provides access to exotic energy sources, it could revolutionize human civilization in ways that dwarf any previous technological revolution. If gravity manipulation is possible, it would invalidate fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. If consciousness can interact with technology in ways suggested by some alien encounter accounts, it would require complete revision of our understanding of mind and matter. The compartmentalization of such research creates its own ethical dilemmas. Scientists working on fragments of revolutionary discoveries, prevented by classification from communicating with colleagues or publishing their findings, operate in isolation that violates basic principles of scientific method. Knowledge advances through peer review, replication of experiments, and open collaboration. Secrecy may protect discoveries, but it also prevents the verification and refinement that legitimate science requires. Consider the career trajectories of alleged Area 51 researchers. These individuals, if their accounts are accurate, have participated in the most significant scientific investigations in human history, while being legally prohibited from discussing their work with anyone. They retire carrying knowledge that could transform civilization, bound by oath and law to take their discoveries to their graves. The psychological burden on such individuals must be extraordinary. Several alleged former employees describe symptoms consistent with severe stress disorders, insomnia, anxiety, depression, and social isolation resulting from their inability to process and share traumatic or revelatory experiences. The human cost of absolute secrecy extends beyond professional consequences to fundamental questions of mental health and social connection. The democratic implications are equally troubling. If government agencies possess knowledge that would fundamentally alter human understanding of our place in the universe, the continued classification of such information represents a form of intellectual authoritarianism that sits uncomfortably with principles of open government and informed citizenship. The decision process for maintaining such secrecy remains opaque. Who determines when, if ever, revolutionary discoveries should be shared with the broader scientific community or general public? What criteria guide such decisions, and what oversight mechanisms ensure that classification serves legitimate rather than bureaucratic interests? Historical precedent offers few guidelines for handling discoveries of cosmic significance. Previous technological revolutions, agriculture, writing, printing, industrialization occurred through gradual development and natural diffusion, rather than sudden revelation of complete paradigm shifts. If alien technology provides access to capabilities that skip centuries of normal technological development, the social and economic disruption could be unprecedented. The international dimension adds further complexity. If one nation possesses technologies derived from extraterrestrial sources, the resulting strategic imbalance could destabilize global politics in unpredictable ways. The temptation to use such advantages aggressively, or the fear that adversaries might develop countermeasures, could lead to conflicts more devastating than any in human history. Yet the argument for disclosure carries its own compelling logic. If humanity faces existential challenges like climate change, resource depletion, or potential asteroid impacts, technologies that could address such threats might be morally required for release, regardless of other considerations. If consciousness is not unique to Earth, the philosophical and spiritual implications might be too significant for any government to withhold from human understanding. The religious and cultural impacts of confirmed extraterrestrial contact would reverberate through every human institution. Organized religions would face challenges to theological frameworks that assume human uniqueness. Educational systems would require fundamental restructuring to incorporate new understanding of physics, biology, and consciousness. Economic systems built on scarcity might collapse if revolutionary energy sources became available. The gradual disclosure approach favored by some researchers suggests revealing information slowly to allow social adaptation, rather than sudden announcements that could trigger panic or disbelief. Incremental release of evidence might allow human civilization to adjust gradually to expanded realities. However, this approach requires trust in institutions that have demonstrated willingness to maintain deception for decades. The technological singularity concept, where artificial intelligence or other technologies create recursive improvement cycles leading to unpredictable change, provides a framework for understanding how revolutionary discoveries might transform civilization. If alien technologies represent a form of imposed singularity's sudden access to capabilities that compress centuries of development into immediate availability, social and economic disruption could be manageable only through careful preparation and gradual introduction. The question of readiness becomes central to any disclosure discussion. Are human institutions stable enough to handle confirmation of extraterrestrial visitation? Do educational systems provide sufficient scientific literacy for the general population to understand revolutionary physics principles? Can economic systems adapt to technologies that might obsolete entire industries overnight? These considerations assume that the alleged discoveries at Area 51 are genuine and that disclosure decisions rest with human authorities. But if extraterrestrial beings maintain active involvement in Earth affairs, the timing and manner of disclosure might ultimately remain beyond human control. Technologies that can manipulate space-time or consciousness might be wielded by intelligences with agendas that transcend human, political, and social considerations. The legacy of secrecy surrounding Area 51 has already shaped human understanding in subtle but significant ways. Generations have grown up knowing that extraordinary secrets exist but remain hidden, creating a culture of suspicion about official explanations and openness to alternative theories about reality. This erosion of institutional trust might itself represent a form of gradual disclosure, preparing humanity for eventual revelation of more profound truths. When the price of knowledge is the transformation of everything we think, we know about existence itself? Who has the wisdom to decide whether humanity is ready to pay it?